Καλησπέρα και καλώς ήρθατε σε άλλη μια λέξη εκφραστικής ανάγνωσης εν μέσω κορονοϊού 2022. In it, Blyton, the Sea of Adventure. No governess, thank you. Do you know, it's May the 5th already, said Jack in a very gloomy voice. All the fellows will be back at school today. What a pity, said Kiki the parrot, in just as gloomy a voice as Jack's. This awful measles, said Lucy-Anne. First Philip had it as soon as he came home from the hall, then Dinah, then she gave it to me, and then you had it. Well, we're all out of quarantine now, said Dinah from her corner of the room. It's just silly of the doctor to say we ought to go away and have a change before we go back to school. Isn't it enough change to go back to school? I do so love the summer term too. Yes, and I bet I'd have been in the first 11, said Philip, pushing back the tuft of hair he had in front. Golly, I'll be glad to get my hair cut again. It feels tickly now it's grown so long. The four children had all had a bad attack of measles in the holidays. Jack especially had had a very nasty time, and Dinah's eyes had given her a lot of trouble. This was partly her own fault, for she had been forbidden to read, and had disobeyed the doctor's orders. Now her eyes kept watering, and she blinked in any bright light. Certainly no schoolwork for Dinah yet, the doctor had said sternly. I suppose you thought you knew better than I did, young lady, when you disobeyed orders. Think yourself lucky if you don't have to wear glasses a little later on. I hope Mother won't send us away to some awful boarding house by the sea, said Dinah. She can't come with us herself because she's taken on some kind of important job for the summer. I hope she doesn't get us a governess or something to take us away. A governess, said Philip in scorn. I jolly well wouldn't go, and anyway she wouldn't stay now that I'm training young rats. His sister Dinah looked at him in disgust. Philip always had some kind of creature about him, for he had a great love of animals. He could do anything he liked with them, and Lucy-Anne secretly thought that if he met a roaring tiger in a jungle, he would simply hold out his hand and the tiger would lick it like a dog and purr happily like a cat. I've told you, Philip, that if you so much as let me see one of your young rats, I'll scream, Dinah said. Right, then scream, said Philip obligingly. Hey, Squeaker, where are you? Squeaker appeared above the neck of Philip's jersey collar, and true to his name, squeaked loudly. Dinah screamed. You beast, Philip! How many of those things have you got down your neck? If we had a cat, I'd give them all to her. Well, we haven't, said Philip, and poked Squeaker's head down his collar again. 3 blind mice, remarked Kiki the parrot, with great interest, cocking her head on one side and watching for Squeaker to appear again. Wrong, Kiki, old bird, said Jack, lazily putting out a hand and pulling at his parrot's tail feathers. Far from being 3 blind mice, it's one very wide-awake rat. I say, Kiki, why didn't you catch measles from us? Kiki was quite prepared to have a conversation with Jack. She gave a loud cackle and then put her head down to be scratched. How many times have I told you to shut the door? She cried. How many times have I told you to wipe your feet? Wipe the door, shut your feet, wipe the... Hey, you're getting muddled, said Jack, and the others laughed. It was always comical when Kiki mixed up the things she loved to say. The parrot liked to make people laugh. She raised a head, put up a crest, and made a noise like a mowing machine outside in the garden. That's enough, said Jack, tapping her on the beak. Now stop it, Kiki. But Kiki, pleased with the noise, flew up to the top of the curtains and went on being a mowing machine, or one that wanted oiling. Mrs. Mannering put her head in at the door. Children, don't let Kiki make such a noise. I'm interviewing someone and it's very annoying. Who's come for an interview? Said Philip at once. Mother, you haven't gone and got a governess or something awful to take us away for a change, have you? Is she here? Yes, she is, said Mrs. Mannering. All the children groaned. Well, dears, you know I can't spare the time to take you myself, she went on. I've taken on this new job, though, of course, if I'd known you were going to be measly for so long and then be so peaky afterwards. We're not peaky, said Philip indignantly. What an awful word. Peaky squeaky, said Kiki at once, and cackled with laughter. She loved putting the same sounding words together. Peaky squeaky. Shut up, Kiki, called Jack and threw a cushion at her. Aunt Ellie, we can quite well go away by ourselves. We're old enough to look after ourselves perfectly. Jack, as soon as I let you out of my sight in the holidays, you plunge into the middle of the most hair-raising adventures, said Mrs. Mannering. I shan't forget what happened in the last summer holidays. Going off in the wrong aeroplane and being lost for ages in a strange valley." "Oh, that was a marvellous adventure," cried Philip. "I wish we could have another. I'm fed up with being measly so long. Do let us go away by ourselves, Mother. There is a darling." "No," said his mother. You're going to a perfectly safe seaside spot with a perfectly safe governess for a perfectly safe holiday." "Safe, safe, safe," shrieked Kiki. "Sound and safe, sound and safe." "Other way around, Kiki," said Jack. Mrs. Mannering put her fingers to her ears. "That bird. I suppose I'm tired with nursing you all, but honestly, Kiki gets dreadfully on my nerves just now. I shall be glad when she's gone with you." "I bet no governess will like Kiki," said Jack. "Aunt Ally, have you told her about Kiki?" "Not yet," admitted Mrs. Mannering, "but I suppose I'd better bring her in and introduce her to you all, and to Kiki too." She went out. The children scowled at one another. "I knew it would happen. Instead of having fun at school, we shall mope about with somebody we can't bear," said Dinah gloomily. "Phil, can't you do something with those awful rats of yours when she comes in? If she knew you were the kind of boy that likes mice and rats and beetles and hedgehogs living down his neck and in his pockets, she'd probably run for miles." "Jolly good idea, Dinah," said everyone at once, and Philip beamed at her. "It's not often you get a brainwave," he said, "but that's one all right. Hey, Squeaker, come along now. Waffles, where are you? Nosy, come out of my pocket." Dinah retreated to the furthest corner of the room, watching the young white rats in horror. However many had Philip got? She determined not to go near him if she could possibly help it. "I think Kiki might perform also," said Jack, grinning. "Kiki, puff, puff, puff." That was the signal for the parrot to do her famous imitation of a railway engine screeching in a tunnel. She opened her beak and swelled out her throat in delight. It wasn't often that she was begged to make this fearful noise. Lucy-Ann put her hands to her ears. The door opened and Mrs. Mannering came in with a tall, rather stern-looking woman. It was quite plain that no adventure, nothing unusual, would ever be allowed to happen anywhere near Miss Lawson. "Perfectly safe" was written all over her. "Children, this is Miss Lawson," began Mrs. Mannering, and then her voice was drowned in Kiki's railway engine screech. It was an even better imitation than usual, and longer drawn out. Kiki was really letting herself go. Miss Lawson gave a gasp and took a step backwards. At first she did not see Kiki, but looked at the children, thinking that one of them must be making the terrible noise. "Kiki!" thundered Mrs. Mannering, really angry. "Children, how could you let her? I'm ashamed of you." Kiki stopped. She put her head on one side and looked cheekily at Miss Lawson. "Wipe your feet," she commanded. "Shut the door. Where's your handkerchief? How many times have I told you to—" "Take Kiki out, Jack," said Mrs. Mannering, red with annoyance. "I'm so sorry, Miss Lawson. Kiki belongs to Jack, and she isn't usually so badly behaved." "I see," said Miss Lawson, looking very doubtful. "I'm not very much used to parrots, Mrs. Mannering. I suppose, of course, that this bird will not come away with us? I could not be responsible for pets of that kind, and I don't think that a boarding house—" "Well, we can discuss that later," said Mrs. Mannering hastily. "Jack, did you hear what I said? Take Kiki out." "Polly, put the kettle on," said Kiki to Miss Lawson, who took absolutely no notice at all. Kiki growled like a very fierce dog, and Miss Lawson looked startled. Jack caught the parrot, winked at the others, and took Kiki out of the room. "What a pity, what a pity," mourned Kiki as the door shut behind them. Mrs. Mannering gave a sigh of relief. "Jack and Lucy-Ann Trent are not my own children," she said to Miss Lawson. "Lucy-Ann, shake hands with Miss Lawson. Lucy-Ann and her brother are great friends of my own children, and they live with us, and all go off to boarding school together," she explained. Miss Lawson looked at the green-eyed, red-haired little girl and liked her. She was very like her brother, she thought. Then she looked at Philip and Dinah, each dark-eyed and dark-haired, with a queer tuft that stuck up in front. She would make them brush it down properly, thought Miss Lawson. Dinah came forward politely and shook hands. She thought that Miss Lawson would be very proper, very strict, and very dull, but oh so safe. Then Philip came forward, but before he could shake hands he clutched at his neck. Then he clutched at one leg of his shorts. Then he clapped a hand over his middle. Miss Lawson stared at him in amazement. "Excuse me, it's only my rats," explained Philip, and to Miss Lawson's enormous horror she saw Squeaker running round his collar, Nosy making a lump here and there over his tummy, and Waffles coming out of his sleeve. goodness, how many more had the awful boy got? "I'm sorry," said Miss Lawson faintly. "I'm very sorry, but I can't take this post, Mrs. Mannering. I really can't." A glorious idea. After Miss Lawson had hurriedly said goodbye to Mrs. Mannering and the front door had shut after her, Mrs. Mannering came back into the children's playroom looking very cross. "That was too bad of you, really. I feel very annoyed and angry. How could you let Kiki behave like that, Jack? And Philip, there was no need at all for you to make those rats all appear at once." "But mother," argued Philip, "I can't go away without my rats, so it was only fair to let Miss Lawson know what she was in for. I mean, I was really being very honest, and you were being most obstructive," said Mrs. Mannering crossly. "And you know you were. I consider you are all being very... You are all... I consider you are all... Wow. I consider you are all being really unhelpful. You know you can't go back to school yet. You all look thin and pale and you really must pick up first. And I'm doing my best to give you a good holiday in the care of somebody responsible." "Sorry, Aunt Ally," said Jack, seeing that Mrs. Mannering really was upset. "You see, it's the kind of holiday we'd hate. We're too big to be chivied about by Miss Lawson. Now, if it was old Bill..." Old Bill. Everyone brightened up at the thought of old Bill Smuggs. His real name was Cunningham, but as he had introduced himself as Bill Smuggs in their very first adventure, Bill Smuggs he remained. What adventures they had had with him! "Golly, yes! If we could go away with Bill," said Philip, rubbing Squeaker's nose affectionately. "Yes, and dive into the middle of another dreadful adventure," said Mrs. Mannering. "I know Bill." "Oh no, Aunt Ally, it's us children who have the adventures and drag old Bill into them," said Jack. "Really it is. But we haven't heard from Bill for ages and ages." This was true. Bill seemed to have disappeared off the map. He hadn't answered the children's letters. Mrs. Mannering hadn't heard a word. He was not at his home and hadn't been there for weeks. But nobody worried much about him. Bill was always on secret and dangerous missions and disappeared for weeks at a time. Still, this time he really had been gone for ages without a word to anyone. Never mind, he would suddenly turn up, ready for a holiday, grinning all over his cheerful, ruddy face. If only he would turn up now, this very afternoon. That would be grand. Nobody would mind missing the glorious summer term for a week or two if only they could go off with Bill. But no Bill came, and something had to be decided about this holiday. Mrs. Mannering looked at the mutinous children in despair. "I suppose," she said suddenly, "I suppose you wouldn't like to go off to some place somewhere by the sea where you could study the wild seabirds and their nesting habits. I know Jack has always wanted to, but it has been impossible before because you were all at school at the best time of year for it, and—" "Aunt Ally!" yelled Jack, beside himself with joy. "That's the most marvellous idea you ever had in your life! Oh, I say—" "Yes, mother, it's gorgeous," agreed Philip, rapping on the table to emphasize his feelings. Kiki at once rapped with her beak too. "Come in," she ordered solemnly, but no one took any notice. This new idea was too thrilling. Lucy Ann always loved to be where her brother Jack was, so she beamed too, knowing how happy Jack would be among his beloved birds. Philip too, lover of animals and birds, could hardly believe that his mother had made such a wonderful suggestion. Only Dinah looked blue. She was not fond of wild animals, and was really scared of most of them, though she was better than she had been. She liked birds, but hadn't the same interest in and love for them that the boys had. Still, to be all by themselves in some wild, lonely place by the sea, wearing old clothes, doing what they liked, picnicking every day, what joy! So Dinah began to smile too, and joined in the cheerful hullabaloo. "Can we really go, all by ourselves? When? Do say when!" "Tomorrow! Can't we go tomorrow? Golly, I feel better just at the thought of it. Mother, whatever made you think of it? Honestly, it's wizard." Kiki sat on Jack's shoulder listening to the babble of noise. The rats hidden about Philip's clothes burrowed deeply for safety, scared of such a sudden outburst of voices. "Give me a chance to explain," said Mrs. Mannering. "There's an expedition setting out in 2 days' time for some of the lonely coasts and islands off the north of Britain. Just a few naturalists and one boy, the son of Dr. Jones, the ornithologist." All the children knew what an ornithologist was, one who loved and studied birds and their ways. Philip's father had been a bird lover. He was dead now, and the boy often wished he had known him, for he was very like him in his love for all wild creatures. "Dr. Jones," said Philip. "Why, that was one of Daddy's best friends." Yes, said his mother. I met him last week, and he was telling me about this expedition. His boy is going, and he wondered if there was any chance of you and Dinah going, Philip. You weren't at all well then, and I said no at once. But now we can, cried Philip, giving his mother a sudden hug. Fancy you thinking of somebody like Miss Lawson when you knew about this. How could you? Well, it seems a long way for you to go, said Mrs. Mannering, and it wasn't exactly the kind of holiday I had imagined for you. Still, if you think you'd like it, I'll ring up Dr. Jones and arrange for him to add 4 more to his bird expedition if he can manage it. Of course he'll be able to manage it, cried Lucy-Anne. We shall be company for his boy too, Aunt Ally. I say, won't it be absolutely lovely to be up so far north in this glorious early summer weather? The children felt happy and cheerful at tea time as they discussed the expedition, to go exploring among the Northern Islands, some of them only inhabited by birds, to swim and sail and walk and watch hundreds, no, thousands of wild birds in their daily lives. There'll be puffins up there, said Jack happily. Thousands of them. They go there in nesting time. I've always wanted to study them. They're such comical-looking birds. Puff, puff, puffin, said Kiki at once, thinking it was an invitation to let off her railway engine screech. But Jack stopped her sternly. No, Kiki, no more of that. Frighten the gulls and cormorants, the guillemots and the puffins all you like with that awful screech when we get to them. But you are not to let it off here. It gets on Aunt Ally's nerves. What a pity, said Kiki mournfully. Puff, puff, ch-ch-ch. Idiot, said Jack, and ruffled the parrot's feathers. She sidled towards him on the tea-table and rubbed her beak against his shoulder. Then she pecked a large strawberry out of the jar of jam. Oh, Jack, began Mrs. Mannering, you know I don't like Kiki on the table at mealtimes. And really, that's the 3rd time she's helped herself to strawberries out of the jam. Put it back, Kiki, ordered Jack at once. But that didn't please Mrs. Mannering either. Really, she thought it would be very, very nice and peaceful when the 4 children and the parrot were safely off on their holiday. The children spent a very happy evening talking about the coming holiday. The next day, Jack and Philip looked out their field glasses and cleaned them up. Jack hunted for his camera, a very fine one indeed. I shall take some unique pictures of the puffins, he told Lucy-Anne. I hope they'll be nesting when we get there, Lucy-Anne, though I think we might be a bit too early to find eggs. Do they nest in trees? Asked Lucy-Anne. Can you take pictures of their nests too, and the puffins sitting on them? Jack smiled. Puffins don't nest in trees, he explained. They nest in burrows underground. Gracious, said Lucy-Anne, like rabbits. Well, they even take rabbit burrows for nesting places sometimes, said Jack. It will be fun to see puffins scuttling underground to their nests. I bet they will be as tame as anything too, because on some of these bird islands nobody has ever been known to set foot, so the birds don't know enough to fly off when people arrive. You could have puffins for pets easily then, said Lucy-Anne. I bet Philip will. I bet he'll only just have to whistle and all the puffins will come huffing and puffing to meet him. Everyone laughed at Lucy-Anne's comical way of putting things. Huffin' and puffin', said Kiki, scratching her head. Huffin' and puffin', poor little piggy-wiggy-pig. Now that's what she's talking about, said Jack. Kiki, you do talk a lot of rubbish. Poor little piggy-wiggy-pig, repeated Kiki solemnly. Huffin' and puffin', huffin' and... Philip gave a shout of laughter. I know! She remembered hearing the tale of the wolf and the 3 little pigs. Don't you remember how the wolf came huffing and puffing to blow their house down? Oh, Kiki, you're a marvel. She'll get the puffins something to think about, said Dinah. Won't you, Kiki? They'll wonder what sort of a freak has come to visit them. Hello, is that the telephone bell? Yes, said Jack, thrilled. Aunt Ally has put through a call to Dr. Jones to tell him if we'll join his expedition, but he was out, so she asked for him to ring back when he got home. I bet that's his call. The children crowded out into the hall where the telephone was. Mrs. Mannering was already there. The children pressed close to her, eager to hear everything. Hello, said Mrs. Mannering. Is that Dr. Jones? Oh, it's Mrs. Jones. Yes, Mrs. Mannering here. What's that? Oh, I'm so dreadfully sorry. How terrible for you. Oh, I do so hope it isn't anything serious. Yes, of course, I quite understand. He will have to put the whole thing off, till next year perhaps. Well, I do hope you'll have good news soon. You'll be sure to let us know, won't you? Goodbye. She hung up the receiver and turned to the children with a solemn face. I'm so sorry, children, but Dr. Jones has been in a car accident this morning. He's in hospital, so of course the whole expedition is off. Off? No bird islands after all. No glorious, carefree time in the wild seas of the north. What a terrible disappointment. Very mysterious. Everyone was upset. They were sorry for Mr. Jones, of course, and for Mrs. Jones, of course, and for her husband, but as they didn't know them at all, except as old friends of Mr. Mannering long ago, the children felt far, far more miserable about their own disappointment. "We talked about it such a lot, and made such plans, and got everything ready," groaned Philip, looking sadly at the field glasses hanging nearby in their brown leather cases. "Now Mother will look for another Miss Lawson." "No, I won't," said Mrs. Mannering. "I'll give up my new job and take you away myself. I can't bear to see you so disappointed, poor things." "No, darling Aunt Ally, you shan't do that," said Lucy-Anne, flinging herself on Mrs. Mannering. "We wouldn't let you. Oh dear, whatever can we do?" Nobody knew. It seemed as if their sudden disappointment made everyone incapable of further planning. The bird holiday or nothing, the bird holiday or nothing, that was the thought in all the children's minds. They spent the rest of the day pottering about miserably, getting on each other's nerves. One of their sudden quarrels blew up between Philip and Dinah, and with yells and shouts they belaboured one another in a way they had not done for at least a year. Lucy-Anne began to cry. Jack yelled angrily, "Stop hitting Dinah, Philip, you'll hurt her." But Dinah could give as good as she got, and there was a loud crack as she slapped Philip full across his cheek. Philip caught her hands angrily, and she kicked him. He tripped her up, and down she went on the floor with her brother rolling over and over too. Lucy-Anne got out of their way, still crying. Kiki flew up to the electric light and cackled loudly. She thought Philip and Dinah were playing. There was such a noise that somebody heard the telephone bell ringing again. There was such a noise that nobody heard the telephone bell ringing again. Mrs. Mannering, frowning at the yells and bumps from the playroom, went to answer it. Then she suddenly appeared at the door of the playroom, her face beaming. It changed when she saw Dinah and Philip fighting on the floor. "Dinah! Philip! Get up at once! You ought to be ashamed of yourselves, quarrelling like this now that you are so big. I've a good mind not to tell you who that was on the telephone." Philip sat up, rubbing his flaming neck. Flaming cheek, man. Dinah wriggled away, holding her arm. Lucy-Anne mopped her tears, and Jack scowled down at the pair on the floor. "What a collection of bad-tempered children," said Mrs. Mannering. Then she remembered that they all had measles badly and were probably feeling miserable and bad-tempered after their disappointment that day. "Listen," she said more gently. "Guess who that was on the telephone?" "Mrs. Jones, to say that Dr. Jones is all right after all?" suggested Lucy-Anne hopefully. Mrs. Mannering shook her head. "No, it was old Bill." "Bill! Hurrah! So he's turned up again at last," cried Jack. "Is he coming to see us?" "Well, he was very mysterious," said Mrs. Mannering. "Wouldn't say who he was, just said he might pop in tonight late, if nobody else was here. Of course I knew it was Bill. I'd know his voice anywhere." Quarrels and bad temper were immediately forgotten. The thought of seeing Bill again was like a tonic. "Did you tell him we'd had measles and we're all at home?" demanded Philip. "Does he know he'll see us too?" "No, I hadn't time to tell him anything," said Mrs. Mannering. "I tell you, he was most mysterious, hardly on the telephone for half a minute. Anyway, he'll be here tonight. I wonder why he didn't want to come if anyone else was here." "Because he doesn't want anyone to know where he is, I should think," said Philip. "He must be on one of his secret missions again. Mother, we can stay up to see him, can't we?" "If he isn't later than 9:30, said Mrs. Mannering. She went out of the room. The four looked at one another. "Good old Bill," said Philip. "We haven't seen him for ages. Hope he comes before 9:30. "Well, I jolly well shan't go to sleep till I hear him come," said Jack. Wonder why he was so mysterious. The children expected to see Bill all the evening, and were most disappointed when no car drove up and nobody walked up to the front door. 9:30 came and no Bill. "I'm afraid you must all go to bed," said Mrs. Mannering. "I'm sorry, but really you all look so tired and pale. That horrid measles. I do feel so sorry that expedition is off. It would have done you all the good in the world." The children went off to bed, grumbling. The girls had a bedroom at the back and the boys at the front. Jack opened the window and looked out. It was a dark night. No car was to be heard, nor any footsteps. "I shall listen for Bill," he told Philip. "I shall sit here by the window till he comes. You get into bed. I'll wake you if I hear him." "We'll take it in turns," said Philip, getting into bed. "You watch for an hour, then wake me up and I'll watch." In the back bedroom the girls were already in bed. Lucy-Anne wished she could see Bill. She loved him very much. He was so safe and strong and wise. Lucy-Anne had no father or mother, and she often wished that Bill was her father. Aunt Allie was a lovely mother, and it was nice to share her with Philip and Dinah. She couldn't share their father because he was dead. I hope I shall keep awake and hear Bill when he comes, she thought. But soon she was fast asleep, and so was Dinah. The clock struck 10:30 and then 11. Jack woke Philip. "Nobody has come yet," he said. "Your turn to watch, Tufty. Funny that he's so late, isn't it?" Philip sat down at the window. He yawned. He listened, but he could hear nothing. And then he suddenly saw a streak of bright light as his mother, downstairs, pulled back a curtain and the light flooded into the garden. Philip knew what it was, of course, but he suddenly stiffened as the light struck on something pale, hidden in a bush by the front gate. The something was moved quickly back into the shadows, but Philip had guessed what it was. "That was someone's face, I saw. Somebody is hiding in the bushes by the gate. Why, it can't be Bill. He'd come right in. Then it must be somebody waiting in ambush for him. Golly!" He slipped across to the bed and awoke Jack. He whispered to him what he had seen. Jack was out of bed and by the window at once, but he could see nothing, of course. Mrs. Mannering had drawn the curtain back over the window and no light shone out now. The garden was in darkness. "We must do something quickly," said Jack. "If Bill comes, he'll be knocked out, if that's what that man there is waiting for. Can we warn Bill? It's plain he knows there's danger for himself, or he wouldn't have been so mysterious on the telephone and insisted he couldn't come if anyone else was here. I wish Aunt Allie would go to bed. What's the time? The clock struck 11 some time ago, I know." There came the sound of somebody clicking off lights and a door closing. "It's Mother," said Philip. "She's not going to wait any longer. She's coming out of bed. Good. Now the house will be in darkness, and maybe that fellow will go." "We'll have to see that he does," said Jack. "Do you suppose Bill will come now, Philip? It's getting very late." "If he says he will, said Philip. "Shh, here's Mother." Both boys hopped into bed and pretended to be asleep. Mrs. Mannering switched the light on, and then, seeing that both boys were apparently sound asleep, she switched it off again quickly. She did the same in the girls' room, and then went to her own room. Philip was soon sitting by the window again, eyes and ears open for any sign of the hidden man in the bushes below. He thought he heard a faint cough. "He's still there," he said to Jack. "He must have got wind of Bill coming here tonight. Or more likely still, he knows that Bill is a great friend of ours, and whatever gang he belongs to has sent a man to watch in that bush every night," said Jack. "He's hoping that Bill will turn up sooner or later. Bill must have a lot of enemies. He's always tracking down crooks and criminals." "Listen," said Philip. "I'm going to creep out of the back door and get through the hedge of the next door garden and out of their back gate, so as not to let that hidden man hear me. And I'm going up to watch for old Bill and warn him. He'll come up the road, not down, because that's the way he always comes." "Good idea," said Jack. "I'll come too." "No, one of us must watch to see what that man down there does," said Philip. "We'll have to know if he's there or not. I'll go. You stay at the window. If I find Bill coming along, I'll warn him and turn him back." "All right," said Jack, wishing he had the exciting job of creeping about the dark gardens to go and meet Bill. "Give him our love and tell him to phone us if he can, and we'll meet him somewhere safe." Philip slipped quietly out of the room. There was still a light in his mother's room, so he went very cautiously downstairs, anxious not to disturb her. She would be very scared if she knew about the hidden man. He opened the back door quietly, shut it softly behind him, and went out into the dark garden. He had no torch, for he did not want to show any sign of himself at all. He squeezed through a gap in the hedge and came into the next door garden. He knew it very well. He found the path and then made his way quietly along the grass at the edge of it, afraid of making the gravel crunch a little if he walked on it. Then he thought he heard a sound. He stopped dead and listened. Surely there wasn't another man hiding somewhere. Could they be burglars, not men waiting for Bill after all? Ought he to creep back and telephone to the police? He listened again, straining his ears, and had a queer feeling that there was someone nearby also listening. Listening for him, Philip. Listening for him, Philip, perhaps. It was not a nice thought, there in the darkness. He took a step forward, and then suddenly someone fell on him savagely, pinned his arms behind him, and forced him on his face to the ground. Philip bit deep into the soft earth of a flower bed and choked. He could not even shout for help. Καλό βράδυ.